Welcome to Keep Talking, a podcast by the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. I'm your host, Sam Madore. Keep Talking is all about having honest conversations around mental health, lived experience, and hope. In this episode, we're joined by Morgan Manzer, communications specialist and lawyer with Nova Scotia Legal Aid, and also the chair of the Mental Health Foundation Board of Trustees. Later in the episode, we'll continue the conversation with Foundation President and CEO Star Cunningham. I'm so glad you're here. Let's keep talking. Please be advised, this conversation may contain discussion of suicide. I am here with Morgan Manzer. Hello, Morgan.
Hello, Sam.
It's so great to have you on our podcast.
It's really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Morgan, you've been involved with the Mental Health Foundation for a long time. Let's just dive in first to that experience. How long, you're on the board now, and how long have you been on the Board of Trustees?
I've been on the Board of Trustees since 2019.
Okay, and currently the chair.
I'm currently the chair, so I became chair in July of 2024.
Awesome. That's excellent. And so one question I'd like to ask board members, any board members on any board, is what drew you to this organization?
I think for me, a lot of it was my own personal experience with mental health. And as a child protection lawyer, so much of my professional work was with folks dealing with mental health and addiction. And so, I feel a responsibility. I've been so fortunate. And so I wanted to give back to help support folks who are still facing challenges with mental health and addiction and try to support them and give everyone the sort of opportunities that I had. And so I actually answered an open call to join the board at that time, and I was interviewed and was ultimately successful and obviously very grateful to contribute to the foundation.
That's excellent. It's interesting that you had that professional and personal experience to sort of balance, hey?
Yeah, I think it gave me many different outlooks on it, because obviously, my personal experience is unique to me and very particular. But to see so many different folks, living with mental illness or addiction and how they face it, what their experiences were in terms of accessing treatment or programming or the challenges that they were facing in their day-to-day lives related to that, was always very eye-opening. And, it really reinforced for me the need for the type of work that the foundation does, providing access to people, often in a non-traditional way. So with that outlook, I knew what I wanted to do is to, help provide community-based support to ensure that everyone can, access the supports that they need.
Oh, that's excellent. And I can't even imagine when you say child protective law, just what the depths of that look like in relation to mental health and wellness, because every story, every situation probably, I don't want to make assumptions, but has some tie or connection to mental health.
It really does. For most of my folks, so I represent the parents who the government has intervened in their families because of a child protection concern. And so a very large percentage of the clients that I serve are living with a mental health or addiction issue in some way. And if they're not even at the beginning, once the government becomes involved in their family, that becomes a very stressful event for them. And by virtue of that, it can have negative impacts on their mental wellness. And so, it can be something that comes out through the course of the file. And so, you get a lot of experiences with how people are understanding mental health and addiction, how people are addressing it, and the impacts that it's making.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And impact is such a huge piece of when you're on a board and when you're doing important work like the Mental Health Foundation is doing, is measuring that impact and being able to know that you're making a difference. And how do you feel that you're able to, I guess, gauge that as a board member to say that, this is great, this is the impact that I can see happening?
It's pretty easy because I see it every single day. So many of my
What a great
clients,
answer.
It's true though. So many of my clients access the programs that we fund.
Oh,
It is
awesome.
absolutely 100% a lifeline for them. One of the real challenges, obviously, that we know about is the lack of access to mental health and addictions care through our traditional systems. And for a lot of the communities that I serve, I particularly work with Mi'kmaq, African Nova Scotian, newcomer communities, and there are significant barriers for them accessing the traditional healthcare system. And so many of them turn to the community-based organizations that we fund to provide that care that they desperately need, and it reduces those barriers. And so they're accessing this program, whether it's more traditional counseling or whether it's one of the new innovative programs. And so almost all of my clients are accessing one of the programs in which we're supporting the organization.
What a gift for you to have that knowledge just in your back pocket too, to have that connection to the foundation, to be able to know of these programs that are out there.
Yeah, it's really so important because a lot of the times people need that navigation support, is they
Right.
don't know what is potentially available to them that may fit their particular unique needs. And so that is the nice thing, is having the knowledge of all of these great, tremendous programs that are out there through the foundation, and then being able to direct folks to the one that may be best suited for them. And then you really get an understanding from those clients about what is actually happening in those programs, what it looks like, how it feels, what they're experiencing, and why they're benefiting from it, is also really important feedback.
Well, you can bring that back to the foundation.
Exactly,
back to
and
the
helps
board. Yeah.
guide my decision making here and the grants that we're funding.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice kind of feedback loop that I have. But obviously, it's very gratifying to know that the foundation is doing tremendous work in community. It really is making a difference for folks in something that is so instrumental in their lives. Right? These are very, very high stress situations involving someone's children and their family, and so they're really facing significant challenges. And to be able to provide them with support that they need to hopefully be able to reunite their family or address some of the issues that were present is just really fantastic.
Oh, that's so good. And just to, yes, like you said, to be able to see that full circle happening is so important. And so you talked about personal experience as well, Morgan, and I want to thank you for being open about personal experience. I know it's never an easy task to open and share, struggles with mental health and wellness. Do you want to give us maybe some insight into how you got to the point where you were comfortable in sharing your story?
Yeah, I think my perspective on this has changed over time. And, I now really view my experiences of overcoming and then managing mental health as a superpower for me. That has actually been so important in strengthening who I am and my perspectives of the world. And that's not always the case when you're in a place where you're struggling. It's very difficult, and you're living it each and every day. It's really hard to kind of have that perspective, that higher level perspective on it. And so it took me, quite a number of years until I felt that I was in a place that was really well managed, that I could, be very open about that. And, to me, I'm proud of all elements of me, of my traits, of my character, and that's part of it, and that's a piece of me, and it will be for all of my life. And I do think it's important for folks to show those who are living with mental health or addiction are still in every aspects of our life, in our society, every range of job and occupation, and all the folks we interact with. And the vast majority are, living productive and happy lives. And I think that's really important. So anytime that I can share about, my journey and kind of where I'm at, I hope that others can, see themselves or see a little hope in that, is that, it is something that you can overcome and manage in your day-to-day life and live a really fulfilling, happy life.
That's amazing. And you're right. And it is harder to see on the harder days for sure. But I think the more you talk about it and the more you share, the easier you can reflect on some of those, more positive moments when you need them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me in my work, it's been so helpful because it helps me empathize and relate with the people that I serve. And so it is much easier for me sometimes to understand what they're describing to me when they're explaining their circumstances or their experiences.
Yeah.
And even if I can't totally relate, there's always a piece of their story that I can see myself and I can see my experiences.
Right.
And just by virtue of that, it builds some empathy for folks.
Yeah.
And it helps facilitate those often difficult conversations that we're going to have with one another and how I would approach it and frame it and every aspect of that conversation. So to me, it's a real benefit.
Yeah. Well, it's your superpower.
Yeah,
I love
it
that.
really is.
I really love that you say that because it is taking that, oftentimes considered a very negative aspect of a lot of, if you think, oh, I've got depression or I've got, severe anxiety or whatever that looks like as a negative, but being able to recognize that that does allow you to be the person that you are and that sensitive person who can recognize, similar people in similar situations and have that empathy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
So
amazing.
it takes often a while to get to that point, for sure. Right? I don't want to say that it was an easy road to get there.
And you
There's lots of
sometimes
times.
forget it, and then you remember it again, and then you forget it, and then
Yeah. So but I do think, and a lot of that is because I do feel tremendously fortunate that I was able to receive the support that I needed in order to address the concerns that I had and be well now. Of course, there's always difficult days.
Of course,
they come up, and you need to rely on your skills and your support network in order to help you through those.
Right.
But I've been at a point for a very long time now where I have had my mental illness well managed and able to do the things that I love and live a very happy and fulfilling life.
That's amazing. I really love that. Was there ever any fear for you when you were first, considering, well, obviously, and I want to actually ask the question too before I say that, was there any connection between you sharing your story and you joining the Mental Health Foundation board, or did that sort of happen at separate times?
I think they happened somewhat separately. I think for me to be able to join the foundation, I had to be open about my mental health and addiction because by virtue of being on the board of the foundation, you are an advocate for the foundation. And so for me to be able to do that authentically, I had to be living my full authentic life, and that includes owning my mental health. And so for me, that was a really important piece. And so I had gotten to a point where I was very open about that, was very prepared to share that with others. And that, I think, allows me to really show up as my full self to the foundation in whatever way that they need me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. I really love that you said that because I think it's about living the values of the organization too, right? If you're not sharing your own story and you're the chair of the board or on the board or whatever, it would be a disconnect there for the values for sure. Was there ever any fear for you at that time when I think a lot of times in workplaces, folks feel nervous about sharing, and I know I certainly did, sharing about mental illness. Was there fear for you around that?
Of course, I think there's always some fear and some apprehension about sharing that sort of thing. Certainly in all of my work, I've seen that with colleagues of my own about that fear and about what repercussions may come from that. And a lot of that is, our fear of judgment. Our fear that others will believe, that we're not capable of the job, we're not up for it, it could hurt our career advancement, and all of those. And some of them are real, very real, and there's well-documented history of that. And some of those I think we do place on ourselves, and they are fear-based. And so, trying to be clear-eyed about that and do the work to make sure that, when you do disclose, you're doing so in a very supported way and in a safer environment. It is true that for some folks, they're unable to share at work for a whole host of reasons. I'm not naive to say I was very fortunate to be in a workplace where I felt the comfort level that it was safe for me to do so. And part of it, for me, was really a calculation of, I want a workplace where I can be my full self, and I want the folks that I work with to understand how I'm showing up, and if there was, challenging days or an issue that I wanted to be able to just share that openly.
Right.
And I was very fortunate that the reactions were very positive and were very supportive, and I've been given the opportunity to speak to many of my colleagues about these issues, about my experiences, about the process and navigating even professional folks to the resources that they may need. And we know that one of the largest barriers is people just asking for help.
100%.
And I see that in the legal profession. The statistics are very clear. Particularly men are less likely to ask for support than women, and we know just the rates of folks asking for support is much lower than we know the prevalence of mental health and addiction is. And so that continues to be a concern that folks feel unwilling or unable to be able to reach out and get the support that they need. And unfortunately, for many folks, that means they're suffering and they're struggling for a period of time, which is affecting every aspect of their life, their home life, their work life, how they're showing up in all their endeavors. And so that becomes a real challenge. And for some folks, without getting that support, without acknowledging that, they're having some difficulties in getting the support they need, they face some real challenges in the professional career, especially in a career like mine. It's very challenging. It's very difficult.
Yes.
And so dealing with folks with mental health and addiction while you're struggling yourself can really compound the problems.
100%. And also, though, how important it is that somebody in your profession, i.e. you, is able to stand up and say those things and be that person for somebody else who might be struggling on the professional side, but also on the client side, right? To be able to, you are able to be that bridge, I guess, between those two.
Yeah, and I hope
folks.
to be able to do that and continue that conversation. There's been many great folks before me in the legal profession who have done that as well.
Yeah.
Who've had the courage to, disclose and express, their true lived reality with mental health and addiction. And so that did, even for me, provide, some surety that you can be successful,
right?
Quote unquote successful, even though you may be living with mental health or addiction.
Yeah, great. I love that. One thing we've been asking all of our guests is what you do on those days when you are struggling and you want to find joy in the day-to-day, when you recognize that, I just need to seek something out. Maybe it's walking your dog, maybe whatever it is. What are those things that you seek out?
Yeah, I just want to say I think that's incredibly important. And it's also incredibly challenging. And especially,
yes,
right?
Yes,
I actually had, I think it was a physician of mine when I was very young, maybe a teenager. And she said some days just getting up and getting in the shower is enough.
Yeah.
And so that, we always maybe judge ourselves based on the best day. And sometimes we do have to modify that and listen to our body and ourselves and do what we can in any given day. And, it's really hard in a professional setting because there are all these demands and expectations placed on us by ourselves and by others.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, we often let those really important key things that we could be doing to enhance our wellness fall to the wayside.
Totally.
And, we just live in a culture that is so busy. And, we often measure ourselves by how much we're doing. We tell people, I'm really busy and I'm doing these. I got these 10 things I need to do. And
comparing against what the other person, the 10 things the other person's doing. And
yeah. And so I think it is more important than ever than sometimes just slow us down. And you need to understand yourself, because you need to understand your body, your thinking patterns, your perspectives, to understand what's going to benefit you most. And that's going to be different than anybody else. And that's going to be somewhat unique to you. So
and you have to figure that out for yourself.
You do, yeah. So things that might work for you maybe not work for me.
Yeah.
I love to listen to music. That's one thing that can often, calm me down or just immediately elevate my mood in a certain way. Or sometimes it's sad music that might make you cry, and that is cathartic.
That's what you need too.
Yeah, and that's what you need too. So it may be that. So that's one for me. I think obviously physical activity in any form is just really, really important. And a good night's sleep. And there's things that sometimes I let, go by the wayside, those really important routines. And so sometimes it takes some reminding to myself to be like, oh, I need to get back on track, and I need to be doing those things, because I know what happens when I don't.
The vicious cycle, right? Yeah. Once one thing goes, the rest follows. Yeah.
And, and I got into meditation was one thing
awesome.
that I learned. And again, it doesn't necessarily come naturally to me, but it's something that I continue to practice.
Yeah.
And it really, for me, provides me some real guidance and some reminders of really just core and important principles to be better in tune with my body and my mind.
And knowing which one to pull on which day at which time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that can be challenging. And to sometimes just pause and stop and be present. We just lived in such a fast-paced world that I often think we're not really present enough in the actual moment. We're always thinking about what the email I need to send, or what's for dinner tonight, or what I'm doing this weekend. I was actually I was curling the other day, and somebody on the sheet beside me, a friend of mine, came up. He said, what are you doing over there? And I was just like, I was just writing an email in my head. Oh. Right. And so, even though I'm at a leisure activity, there I am working in my head. And so I'm not even really
in the moment.
I'm not in the moment, and I'm not really giving my mind and my body a time to really refresh, because I'm actually working, not very effectively either, because it's just in my head, in that moment. And right, that's not a good thing for us to be doing. And so to remind myself, even in those, to be like, actually, I should be present with what I'm doing in this moment and be focused on that, I just think is a really important thing to remind ourselves, particularly people who are working in professional spaces, is we're always just go to the next meeting, next email, and we're not actually present with the issue and the people that we're around.
And not appreciating what you've done, what you've accomplished before you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for this, Morgan. It's been a really great time chatting with you.
No, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
We are continuing our conversation with Star Cunningham, President and CEO of the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. We're going to chat a little bit about our board chair, Morgan Manzer. We just had a great chat.
I'd be happy to talk about Morgan because he's an amazing volunteer.
Yeah, Morgan just has such a great energy about him. And so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is he has shared in the past, but he also shared in our chat about having lived experience with mental illness. And I wanted to chat with you about why that's important for folks, either staff and board, whichever, or both, why it's important to have folks with lived experience on the board.
I think it's important in everything we do, whether it's talking about the Mental Health Foundation or anything, to include the voices that matter when you're part of an organization that's making decisions for people. Morgan brings a knowledge that someone who doesn't have lived experience would have no access to. So what he provides to the foundation is a voice that's been there, a voice that needs to be heard and often isn't heard. So the fact that that voice comes along with a person who is a valuable volunteer, super smart, super engaged, works in the profession that he does work in, is definitely a bonus.
That's so great. And he also mentioned, when you mentioned profession, he also mentioned how great it is that being on the grant committee as well, he's able to see all of the programming that's out there. So when he has clients who come in looking for certain things, he has a better vantage point to direct people to those programs that they might not have known about.
So that's an example of win-win.
Yeah, right.
He's giving his time, and then the time he's giving is allowing him to help others. So that's vitally important. And I think it's also important too to have people with lived experience so that when they talk, people listen and feel like someone's not telling them what to do. Someone's, speaking from being there.
Yeah.
And sharing, what worked for them or how they handled something. A lot of what we do is focused on peer support.
Right.
Peer support is incredibly powerful. And I really think that lived experience should be reflected in the foundation. And it certainly is. You said in the board and the staff and the CEO. It's important that we know what we're doing and that we truly understand the impact our work has.
Amazing. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up this episode, we just wanted to show you a quick video featuring both Morgan and Star that shows you a bit about what we do here at the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. Enjoy.
If you had to give an elevator pitch for the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia, what would you say?
I'd say we're the province's only health foundation solely dedicated to funding mental health and addiction support.
The foundation raises money
so community-based organizations don't have to.
Meaning that they can focus on what they do best, supporting individuals in their communities when and where they need it most.
We are often confused with the Canadian Mental Health Association. They provide the service, we provide the funding.
In fact, the foundation funds many CMHA projects.
When you give to the foundation, you're funding programs that support your neighbors, your friends, and your family right now.
That's because we believe in projects that reduce loneliness,
build connections,
and prevent a mental health emergency from happening in the first place.
A small monthly donation can provide mental health training to someone who can't afford it.
Cover the cost of coffee at a peer support meeting, or put art supplies into the hands of a vulnerable child.
What has been the highlight of your involvement with the foundation so far?
How can I pick just one?
Investing in technology
to make it easier and faster for organizations, whether big or small, to apply for funding.
awarding 375 grants totaling over $4 million last year alone.
Watching a small rural pilot project for volunteer firefighters grow into a provincial mental wellness support program for all.
What are we doing today? We're going out on a search.
Working with a passionate team of amazing people.
Many with lived experience, just like me, who give so much to so many.
Hearing the story of how a single grant has saved someone's life.
Who can help?
You.
Every donation.
Every partner.
Every voice helps us improve the mental wellness of Nova Scotians.
By creating a connected community of hope.
If you would like to learn more, please visit our website at mentalhealthns.ca.